If not, we're going to call an audible, see if Aaron can. Okay, I don't think it's working, which is fine. But I'll point at you every time I want the slides to switch. So that's what we're going to do this morning. Good morning, once again. Thank you for being here. I think everybody here has is worthy of being thanked for being here because it seems now more than ever, people find an excuse not to be here. And they find something else that's more important than worshiping their God. And the reason I'm thanking you for this morning is not for the sake of me, but for the sake of God, because everyone in this room who is here this morning decided that Jesus was important this morning. And that serving their Lord and serving their Father was the most important thing they could be doing. And you were right. There's no better place to be than here with your fellow brothers and sisters this morning. And I thank you for that. So thank you for being here. I'm excited for this lesson. I say this, I think, every time I preach, but this morning, if I've ever meant it, I mean it more, because this one's going to be good. This one's going to be really good. And before we start, I kind of want to give some motivation, if you want to go ahead and click to the next slide, a source of motivation for this lesson. I was going to preach a different lesson when I was asked to preach this morning, but if you remember a couple weeks ago, Jason and Caleb McCourt came and gave a lesson. Jason was in the morning, I believe. Caleb was in the afternoon. And the reason I chose to speak on this, if you click one more time, there's a statistic that Caleb talked about in his lesson. And I had to look it up on Google just to make sure I was right. But this statistic, it's kind of small. I hope you can read that. I'll say it anyways. Where are you going? What are we doing? We're not doing that yet. This statistic talks about that the average person spends about a third of their life working. And that got me thinking. And that scared me, actually, quite a bit. A third of your life working, that is a long period of time. And that is a good chunk of your life. 1/3 of your life. And for the average person, I think Google said that 1/3 of your life was about 90,000 hours. So if you can kind of calculate that head, kind of grasp and put your head around, that there's a potential you spend 90,000 hours of your life working. And you may be wondering, I mentioned just a moment ago that this statistic kind of scared me. And the reason it scared me is because that is a long chunk of time, and there is only a little bit of time left to be doing something else with your life. So this morning what I want to talk about is how are we spending that other 2/3 of our life? A lot of it's asleep. And that's another scary thing, because that takes up a good amount of our life as well. So that means there's just a little bit less than 2/3 of our life to spend doing something else. And another source of motivation is I want to give an announcement this morning. I want to let everybody know. I think you probably heard through the grapevine anyways. It seems like everybody knows. But Emily and I, as of this morning, and as of this morning's service, are going to start attending here at 25th Street. And we're excited about it. And we've talked, and it was a hard decision for us. But we realized there is work to be done here, and that we are close here, and that there's a family here, and there's lots to be done. There's a lot of change happening that we're excited about. But something we've talked about is if we're going to be attending here, how do we want to help? And what do we want to be a part of with this group? And what I want to let you all know is that we're here, and we're here to work. So since we're here, as of today, let's get to work. We'd love to get to work with you all, and we're excited for it. And I'm excited to announce that this morning, and that's another kind of source of motivation. But this morning, all we're going to be talking about is a life working for the Lord. So I'm really excited for this one. There's a lot of good things to say. Now you can go ahead and switch to that next slide. We're going to talk about our agenda this morning. The first point, the first area we're going to talk about is what does it mean to be a worker? Right? We want to define our agenda this morning. We're going to talk about what does it mean to be a worker. If we're going to talk about a life working for God, what does that look like? What does that mean? We're also going to go into talking about what needs to change. Right? If we're not workers for the Lord, and if we're not going about a life that is striving to work for the Lord, what needs to change? And also, how do we apply that change? These kind of go together, and we'll talk about them together. But if there's a change needed, how are we to apply that change? And finally, I want to talk about an interesting point that I'm really excited to talk about, is a mindset. Right? Keeping the mindset, well, if you are a worker, and if you've decided, okay, this is something I have a desire for, and something that I need to be doing, there's a mindset that's involved with that. And what we're going to spend a little bit of time this morning talking about is a mindset that we need to stay away from. And a little caution about a mindset that we really need to stay away from. So that is kind of our agenda this morning. These 4 things are really the focus of what we're talking about. What does it mean to be a worker? What needs to change? How to apply that change? And the mindset that we need to be focusing on. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Let's go into this topic of what is a worker? You're doing a good job, Aaron. You're following me. Yay. Every time I look back, you're there. That's awesome. So what is a worker? Let's talk about first, according to Scripture, what is a worker? If you turn over to the passage of Titus chapter 3, we have this idea of being obedient to authority. And I think this is something I hope we're all familiar with. But what got me thinking of this is this passage in Titus chapter 3, specifically in verse 1 when it says, "Remind them to be submissive to rulers and authorities, to be obedient, to be ready for every good work." And here in Titus, this third chapter talks about this attitude and this mindset to be ready for every good work. And it begins by giving this idea that you need to be reminded of submissiveness, right? To be submissive to rulers and authorities. And I think it gets us thinking the importance of when we all, if we all work jobs, right, or even if we're at home, right, we are submitted to the authority of our parents, we're all familiar with this idea that we respond to authority, right? Most of us have bosses, right? Even if you're the boss of yourself, you've probably witnessed in your life what it means to work for somebody and have someone over you. When they ask you to do something, you do it. And when you don't do it, there's probably consequences that follow that, and some of those consequences can be bigger than others. But what I want us to focus on this morning with this first point exactly is there's one authority, especially when working for the Lord and doing His work, there's one authority that we respond to, and that is God Himself. But I don't want us to think of it as, oh man, I got to do what He says, right? It's my boss, right? A lot of us, I think, have the tendency to not like our bosses, but sometimes we do, which is great. But oftentimes you can find it that you don't, care for who you work for. But in this case, it's something I want us to realize. It is a true blessing that you are able to serve your Father and that you're able to work for someone who is like Him. Think about that a little bit this morning as we talk about submissiveness, talking about authority and submitting to authority. But realize this morning that there's importance to that. That there is authority that we're under, and we have to understand, we have to follow that. And that's what this is for. Right? That's what this is for. We have the Scriptures. God has given us a planned out, detailed description of what He expects us to do and how He expects us to follow us. So that we have authority from God, we follow His authority through the Scriptures. Also want to talk about this idea of leading by example. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 16, I love the Sermon on the Mount. It talks about a lot of different ideas and a lot of good things to think about. But specifically here in chapter 5, verse 16, it says, "In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to the Father who is in heaven." Being an example, showing people who you are and how you operate is important. And it does go a long way. And I think a lot of us, oftentimes I do, that's for sure. I already had to get another one back there. The other clip for this is somewhere along my seat in the path back there. So if you find that, give that to Aaron. But anyways, what are we talking about? Oh yeah, leading by example. Good stuff. It does go a long way. And a lot of the times in my life, I haven't realized how much my example can mean to somebody else. And I'll put this on backwards. See, you can't multitask, Zach. We got to work on that. If anybody is a good multitasker, I'd love to have a few pointers. Anyways, the importance of having an example, being an example, and what got me in this passage, and what really put into reality how important it is and how much it can change a person. And it can change their life because in this last phrase in this verse, it says, "So that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." And if the example that I give, if I'm out in the streets every day showing the example of God and people see me and it changes their life so much that they are now worshiping God themselves and giving glory to the Father in heaven, how much does that mean? And how awesome is that just because I set an example for somebody, I didn't necessarily talk to them and I didn't necessarily know who they were, but they saw what I was about. And now what are they doing? They're worshiping God as well. They're serving Him, and that is crazy to me. That if someone could just look at what I'm doing and it can change the course of their life to where they weren't someone who knew God, but now they know who God is because of my example. And what? They're now giving glory to the Father who is in heaven. That goes a long way. And understand that if you're in the workplace especially, that's a big one for a lot of us. And that's another thing I want to talk about, that just because we're spending 1/3 of our life working in our secular jobs doesn't mean we can't also partake in the work of the Lord during that time. Right? We can be at work and have a huge influence. And it doesn't necessarily mean we have to talk to our coworkers, but show them who you are. And if you're at work and having a bad mouth, if you're at work showing people that are not even talking about what you did over the weekend on Sunday, are you being that example, right? You have the opportunity to do that, and I encourage you to do that this morning. I'm encouraging myself to do that. I work with some people. I feel like I have the opportunity. I can encourage really well, but I haven't been the best encouragement to that, and I haven't been the best example. And as I was writing this lesson, I realized what good of an opportunity that I have, that I am someone who knows the Lord. I am someone who follows Him, and I have the example that even just at work, not even talking to them necessarily about Jesus, but showing them, this is who I am as a person. This is who Jesus has made me to be. See who I am, and see if that can change your life. There's importance. It's necessary to understand what this means to lead by example, so that they too may give glory to the Father who is in heaven. It goes a long way. It's powerful. It really is. This next point I bulleted, and usually when you see something bulleted, it means it's important. All of this stuff is important, but if you want to get something out of this today, let's really focus in on helping those in need. There's an action needed when you're working for the Lord. According to Scripture, you need to be active, especially we see in James chapter 2, verses 14 through 17. This passage says, "What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith, but does not have works? Can that faith save him? If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, be warmed and filled,' without giving them things needed for the body, what good is that? So also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead." And we're going to talk about that idea here in a minute. We're going to go to the end of James in verse 26 here in a minute. But what I want us to focus on in this passage is this idea of helping others. And what good is it if you see someone and let them know, hey, you should go get yourself some help, right? You should go warm, get warm, be filled, whatever, right? What good is it if you do not take action on that? Because what you need to realize this morning is you have an opportunity. And there's importance in knowing that you need to help others. That if someone is lying there needing help and you have everything you can help them with, but you do nothing, you pass by them, right? We can think about the Good Samaritan story, right? And all that and how that goes into it. If you see someone in need and you say, go get your help, I'm going to go on my way, what good have you done? You may have sparked something, but you really haven't. This passage here in James shows us the importance of helping those in need. I think about how powerful this is because a couple, was it months ago now, whenever we handed out Bibles. That was powerful, wasn't it? Right? Those who participated. I'll be honest, I was a little hesitant on going. And I talked to some people here who were also a little bit hesitant on going. But when my wife told me we're going to do this, I was like, okay, that'll be interesting. But after we did it, man, how did we feel? Pretty good, didn't we? Because we were able to see faces light up when we said, hey, would you like a Bible? They said, can I have 3? I have 3 grandchildren at home who I'd love to give a Bible to. That goes a long way. And that's the power of helping people. And that's the power of being active in your community. And that's a point I really want to stress today is that we should take time to understand that and take time to realize what kind of opportunities can we look for. Because being active is essential to the work of the Lord. If you're not active, you're not working. That's the way I see it. Right there, and when you're at work, you can think of the same thing, right? If you're not being productive in your work, are you really working and getting things done? And if you want to achieve a goal, you have to be active. And we have the opportunity today to help people, right? People are in need all around us. We know Jesus, some people don't. We have this opportunity to show them, this is who my Savior is, and this is what I have to look forward to. You want to go with me? You want to go? It goes a long way. Be mindful of being active in helping those in need. Let's now jump down to verse 26 here in James when it says, "For as the body apart from the spirit is dead, so faith apart from works is also dead." Because I think we can all agree, and it shows us time and time again in Scripture that faith is a salvational need, right? If you want to have salvation, you have to have a faith in God. But if you have a faith and you don't apply works to that faith, and James 2 talks about that a lot, and that's another sermon on its own that I've preached before. I'd love to talk to you about it. But faith without works is dead. In the works that you do, if you have this work and working for the Lord, it brings life to the faith that you have. Because you may say you have faith, right? But if you don't do anything about that faith, and you don't share that faith, and you don't show people and help people and be active in working, is that a faith? And what kind of faith is that? Is that a faith that can save? Here in verse 26, for as the body apart from the spirit is dead, also faith apart from works is dead. It's fact. It's stated right there. We need to understand that the life that our faith is given is through the works that we have. And that's important. It shows us how important works is. I also want to turn over to Ephesians chapter 2 here for a moment. This one's interesting, and it's something I haven't really thought of before, because we all know and talked about the creation story and why we're recreated. But here's an interesting point that goes along with works. Here in Ephesians chapter 2, in verse 10, it says, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. Have you ever thought that the reason you were created is to be on this earth to spread the news of Jesus? You weren't put on this earth for physical work. You weren't put on this earth for secular jobs, right? It's hard to understand because, once again, we spend 1/3 of our life in these jobs. Like, this is what a lot of the times we base our life off of. But we weren't created to make a living. And I'm not taking meaning away from our secular jobs, right? We need those, and making a living is important, and supporting our families is important. But what's more important is why we were created and the work that we were created for. Because we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works. That's a part of why we're here today. Scientists can think all they want, how did we ever get here? But I believe the Scriptures more than I believe anything else. And that means something. I'll tell you that this morning. That if you can truly believe that God created you for a purpose, not to work the secular job you're in now, but to work for him, spread the news, so at the end of your life, he can see that we worked for him. That we spent the majority of our time focusing on the true work that needed to be done. And there's work to be done. Let me tell you, there's so much work to be done. This last point I have on here is bolded as well. But this is premised in Colossians chapter 3 and verses 23 beginning. It says, whatever you do, work heartily, as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. Growing up, I had a mindset that I wanted to do big things. And I had a mindset that I wanted to work hard and be this hard worker who dedicated himself to something and just poured my heart into something. And I know what that means. In high school, I loved music. I was in theater, I was in band, I was in choir, I was in music theater. I did everything music, especially my senior year of high school. And I put my heart into it. I did. I worked hard at that. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know since then what I've put my heart into. But I've realized, especially creating this lesson, I realized there is something there for the taking that your heart needs to be put into. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive an inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. The Lord, out of all beings that can ever be, deserves our heart. In the work that's for him, he deserves our heart. So if you're struggling to figure out what my passion is, if you're struggling to how can I truly devote myself to one thing in my whole life, work heartily for the Lord, and what? Realize that you are serving the Lord Christ. I didn't think about that in that last statement of this verse 23 there. It's powerful. Or verse 24. That's powerful. And a lot of times we don't realize what it means to be serving the Lord Christ. Do you think about that? Do you think about what that means? And especially when you put your heart into it, right? There's a purpose for it. There's a reward for it. We all love rewards. I hope you do. I love rewards. I love being rewarded for my work. But this is the most important reward that we can ever imagine. And if we don't put our heart into it, and if we don't realize that we are serving the Lord, are we going to miss out on that great reward? Are you? Seriously, consider that. If you're not putting your heart into the work of the Lord, if you're not everything you're doing for the Lord and not for men, are you putting your heart into it? Are you seeking that reward? Once again, it's the most important reward you can ever imagine. That home with him in heaven, it's waiting for you. It's wanting you to be there too. Give God your heart and understand that the work that you give to him, you have the opportunity to serve him. And the reason that this phrase, you are serving the Lord Christ, doesn't sit well with me, and sometimes I've just kind of skipped over it, is because I don't deserve to serve the Lord. Do any of us deserve to serve the Lord? Do you know what He did for you? Jim talked about it, right? We just had this discussion on what Jesus did for us, dying on the cross. That is what God did for you. And what have you given back to Him? Have you even given anything back to Him? We don't deserve to serve the Lord, but yet He allows us to do it anyways. It means something. It really does. Realize that serving the Lord, your Christ, is a privilege, that He's allowed you to do that. Because once again, I'm going to tell you that. I don't mean to be harsh, but you don't deserve any ounce of it. The person who you've been, the sinner that we are, we don't deserve it. But we serve a great God. And He allows us to worship Him. He allows us to serve Him. So this work means something. And this work that we put our heart into, we can at least give Him that back. We can at least let the Lord know, I am putting my heart into this. And this is for you. Seeking your reward. There's an inheritance for you. Let's work towards that. Let's understand that. Let's go ahead and move on from this. And I want to talk about kind of the change needed. And if you noticed, I did bold 2 of those discussions we just had on that last phrase. And what I want to talk about really is those 2 common areas that are needing improvement. And the reason I believe that as a congregation as a whole, but also as individuals, is because this is something I definitely need to improve in. So let's talk about the first one. Serving those in need and striving to continually spread the news of Christ is essential to our work. It's essential. You need it. The ability to serve those and the work of the Lord, if you haven't gotten the gist already, the work of the Lord is serving Him and helping those who don't know Him and helping those realize who He is and what He can do for their life. But we have to ask ourselves 3 questions with this. The first one being, are we seeking out every opportunity to serve? Are we doing that? And the reason I say this is because I fear that now more than ever, the church has gotten into this cycle of we come on Sundays, sometimes Sunday night like we do, come on Wednesdays, but don't fill that gap with time to serve the Lord together during the week. But I get it. I do. On a Tuesday night when I come home from work, the last thing I want to do is go back out. And all I want to do is come home, sit on the couch with my dog and wife, watch TV, have dinner, and just chill the rest of the night. But do you know what I realized? I have 2/3 of a life to live after work. And there's work to be done after work. What are we doing? Are we seeking every opportunity to serve, even if that does consist on so many opportunities that don't come on Sundays or Wednesdays? Because once again, I'm there with you. I don't want to go anywhere else on the rest of the week, but there's work to be done. Are we seeking out those opportunities? And are we taking every opportunity that comes our way? I get it. We have obligations. We have responsibilities. But I want us to realize this morning how important it is that if an opportunity comes your way to serve the Lord, take it. Because that's the most important opportunity you'll ever get. If an opportunity arises, serve the Lord. Are you taking every opportunity that comes your way? And I want to kind of give my 2 cents of advice here. I believe we're actively looking for an evangelist. And when we're looking for an evangelist, something we don't need to find is someone who's just going to do all the work for us. Right? Someone who's going to find every opportunity for us. How encouraging would it be to an evangelist if he came here and realized that multiple members of the congregation are coming up to him with opportunities? Hey, let's do this. Hey, there's this event in the community. Let's show our presence. Let's spread the gospel. Right? It's not just a preacher's job to get things rolling. It's our job. We all work together. It's not his work alone. It's not solely his job to find everything for us and to do all the work for us. We do the work with him and he does the work with us. It's a partnership. And I'm going to tell you something. He's not more important than you are. Right? We are all as equally important to do the work. So when we're trying to find somebody, let's find someone who is open to that idea of working into the community and having everybody be a part of that. And having everybody come up with ideas and opportunities and saying, hey, I was approached with this opportunity. Let's all of us take it, not just me. Right? Or even if the evangelist says there's an opportunity that comes rise for free, let's all do it. Right? Let's all get together and serve the Lord in our community. There's work to be done out there. I hope you all seen it. There's so much work to be done in our community. Are we taking every opportunity that comes our way? Because I guarantee it, more than you realize, there's so many opportunities that we just let stay aside. There's so many opportunities that we don't take advantage of. And lastly, with this little section here, I want to talk about desire. Do you have a desire to serve those in need and to spread the gospel? And that's really hard to attain, a desire. Because once again, all of us, we like our Sundays and Wednesdays. Some of us just like our Sundays, I'm going to be honest with you. Right? And some of us just like our Sunday. It's just how it is nowadays, right? It's kind of sad, but we don't need to talk about it right now. But some of us just like the routine of being here every once in a while. So that's why it's hard to obtain that desire. But realize the importance of that. Do you have a desire to help those in need and spread the gospel? Find that desire, because it's missing in a lot of us. It was missing in me for a long time. It really is. And not to gloat on myself, but more than ever in my life, I'm ready to serve the Lord. I am. And that's why I'm excited to be here, because I want to spread that energy. And I know so many people in this room. I hope more than ever in your life, you're ready to serve the Lord. That's important. Do you have a desire? And we're going to talk about that a little bit more and what also goes into that desire. But let's go ahead and move on to our attitude, right? And this kind of goes with it. Our attitude goes a long way with getting started with His work. And once again, we can relate all of this to our secular jobs and our secular work. There's been so many times in my life, especially recently, where I'm excited, right? I started a new job, and I'm ready to attack this, and going through the weeks, I get to work, and I'm ready to work, and I get about halfway through my job, and I'm like, I'm done. My desire didn't stay. I'm done. I don't, and that mindset and that attitude was lost. And our attitude goes along. I hope you can kind of connect that, because I know there's times in your life where you had a better attitude and you got more work done, and then you didn't have as good of an attitude and you kind of slacked off a little bit. But there's another 3 questions I'd like us to ask ourselves with this. The first one being, do you have the attitude of a worker? Are you coming to work every day? Are you coming to services every day? And are you coming when you gather together with your people and have an attitude that it's time to work and you're ready for it? That there's a desire when you get together and saying, let's work today. Is that the attitude you have? Are you like, I guess I'll go. That'd be fine. We'll get something done. That was me with this whole Bible handout thing. I'm not going to lie about it. I was a little hesitant on it. I was like, I guess it'll be good. My attitude wasn't there. But it did switch about halfway through, which was amazing. It actually didn't take that long for it to switch. Once I got there, I was excited. But do you have the attitude of a worker? And how is your attitude, secondly, while you work? I talked about this a little bit, right? I got to work, I was ready to go, and about halfway through my job, I lost all motivation. I lost that attitude to work. But it's just as important to keep that attitude through when you're working, right? How is your attitude being when you work? And lastly, are you motivated to make a change and work continuously? If you're not if you don't have the attitude and your mindset is not there to where every time you show up to do a work, you're not ready for it, or you're not really in the mindset to do it, are you willing to make that change? Are you motivated to make a change and work continuously and keep that attitude while you're working? That's important. This attitude thing is important. And what I hope can kind of settle us through is this next slide. We're going to talk about our mindset. Because there's one mindset I really, really want us to be careful of, because it's a mindset I think we all have, and it really shows. There's a story I want to give. It's about me and Aaron. So this may be interesting. This may not. I don't know. I let him know I was telling a story. He didn't know which one. But a couple weeks ago, we were in Vegas for a work trip. And we were walking down the Strip, and if you've been to Vegas, it's like any other city nowadays, just full of worldliness. Full of stuff that distracts us from the main goal. Full of stuff that catches our eye and that's pleasing, but really bad stuff to be a part of. And I don't know what we were doing or what we were talking about, but he looked over at me. He's like, we should really just be, in the center of all this, be praying for people, right? We have this opportunity where we could just, you and I, stand in the middle and just share who Jesus is and pray for them. But what did we do? We kept on. Both of us did. I was like, you're right. I told him, I was like, if Jesus was here, if Paul was here, what would he be doing? He'd be in the middle of all this, preaching the gospel. Would he not be doing that? But the scary thing is, nowadays, which is really sad, people would judge us so hard for that. We'd get a lot of heat for that, and it'd be a little uncomfortable. But how often do we let uncomfortableness get in the way of this mindset? He told me that, and I was like, you're right. I mean, we need to be praying for these people. We have this opportunity to help these people because this world is full of it. And being there on the Strip in Vegas showed us that there's so much worldliness that people are trying to distract us with, but we're not doing anything about it. But it was that phrase that I said and that he said, we should do this. But remember, like I said, we just kept on with our walk. We just kept going. And that brings me to a passage in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verses 8 through 15. I'll read this here. It says, I say this not as a command, but to prove by the earnest of others that your love is also genuine. For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that by his poverty might become rich. And in this matter I give my judgment. This benefits you, who a year ago started not only to do this work, but had that desire to do it. So now finish doing it as well, so that your readiness is in desiring it may be matched by your completing it out of what you have. For if the readiness is there, it is acceptance according to what the person has, not according to what he does not have. For I do not mean that others should be eased by your burden, but as a matter of the fairness, your abundance at the present time should supply their need, so that their your abundance may supply your need, that there may be fairness. As it is written, whoever gathered much had nothing left over, and whoever gathered little had no lack. Ooh, that was a struggle. I'm sorry. I don't know what was going on there. But to summarize this, Paul's talking to the church at Corinth, or wherever we are. Maybe we're in Colossians. Who knows? Corinthians. Okay, he's talking to the church at Corinth. And he's returned again. He's talking about a year ago, I was here and I was preaching, and you had this desire to do the work. And not only had you started it, but you had that desire. We talked a little about the desire. But he's back a year later and he says, what have you even been doing? That's how I see it. I see Paul being like, it's not done yet. What have you been doing? I've been gone this whole year. What have you been doing? Let's finish it. Let's get this going. Have that desire to finish this work. And I correlate that with this thing called the we should mindset. Exactly what that story of Aaron and I portrays. That these people had this desire a year ago when Paul was there and saying, we're going to do that and we're ready for it and we should do this. But a year later, it hadn't been done, right? It hadn't been finished. And that's exactly what I was talking about with Aaron and I. We were like, we should do this. And how often the times the fact, I think Andrew spoke a little bit about this idea this morning in class, that we say things to get out of conversation. Someone might approach you for something saying, you should, there's this opportunity, let's take it. Yeah, you know what? We should do that. But did you do anything about it? Were you able to partake in this mindset of we should do that? But a lot of times, like I said, it's just to get us out of a conversation. It's just to get it moved on. So what I want to challenge us with this morning, I'm going to challenge you with this, and I'm also going to challenge me with this. If we're ever talking to each other and someone says, we should really do this, let's put it on the calendar. If I say something, if I'm talking to you and say, you know what, I should really do this, or we should really do this as a group, let's put it on the calendar. Let's get it going because there's work to be done, and we all have been there. And we all, I think, have a little bit of a desire, right? We're here for a reason this morning. I know you are. Like I talked about a little bit this morning. You chose to be here this morning for a reason. There's a little bit of a desire there, so that the next time you say, let's do something, or maybe we should do this, let's do it. And I'm ready to do it with you. Are you ready to do it with me? Let's do it. Let's get out of this we should mindset because it's dangerous. Let's continue on, and we talked about this morning. If we're going to do something, let's do it. Because I don't want Jesus to come one day, standing before all of us saying, you had this vision of work, and you had this idea that you wanted to go out and help your community and do all these good things, and you established that with each other, but I'm back now, and you hadn't done it. That's scary to me. That is. It's hard to deal with the fact that Jesus may come back one day, and be like, you didn't live up to what you said you were going to do. So let's get out of this we should mindset. Let's understand that if we say we're going to do something, and if we find opportunities, let's take it. Let's be a part of it. And the last point I want to get into today is this reminder of the parable of the talents. I had Josh read it this morning because it's probably the longest reading of today, and I didn't want to read it. So I allowed Josh to read it. But I think hopefully we're all familiar with that passage. If you're not, Josh was able to read it. And it gives this idea that there's these three guys given talents, right? And the different ways they use their talents. And Jesus gives this parable and hoping for the people to understand, if you're given a talent, what are you going to do with it? And in Matthew chapter 25, verse 14 through 30, that's where it is. Yeah, there you go. He's ahead of me. He knows exactly what I want to say. Thanks, Aaron. The first thing I want to kind of address, we all have been given talents. And everyone in this room, believe it or not, you have a talent for something. And Aaron mentioned something about Ezra last week. I went back and watched the sermon. I want to mention it again. Even down to Ezra Walker, he has been given talents. Isn't that kind of neat? That someday you'll get to watch little Ezra grow up and to be something that he has a talent for, and he'll use it. I hope, I pray that he'll use it. But all of us in this room this morning have a talent for something. And we can waste our talent and not use it. And that's the kind of the premise of this parable, right? You have these talents, and we saw the person with one talent who went and buried his, right? And says, I was scared of it. I went and buried it, didn't want anything to do with it. And that's kind of us sometimes, is it not? We waste our talent. We've been giving a talent and we're wasted it. And what that comes out to be is we saw the response of the master. You wicked and slothful servant. Another analogy of Jesus coming back, right? If Jesus comes back and he knows exactly the talents you've been given and knows exactly the way that you can work, how will that make you feel if you're standing and he's right there one day and he says, you wicked and slothful servant. You had this talent and you didn't use it. You wasted your life on, I have given you everything you needed to succeed, but you wasted it. You wicked and slothful servant. But don't get down about that, because there's a brighter side to it. We can use our talent and grow in our skill. We saw the other two people, right, who were given their 5 talents and 2 talents, who went and made and doubled their talents and gained and went back to their master and said, look what all I've done with all you've given me. I've worked hard to achieve more and more and grow in what you've given me. And what was the master's response there? Well done, my good and faithful servant. Now, do you realize the difference between those two responses? That will be you one day, and that Jesus will come back and he will approach you face to face and he will give you one of 2 responses. And I don't know about you, but when I'm standing there right in front of Jesus, I want him to tell me, you good and faithful servant. Because it would break my heart, knowingly, because I know I did it to myself, for Jesus himself to say, you wicked and slothful servant, look what you wasted your life on. I gave you everything you needed to succeed, and you wasted your life. We have all been given talents. Use them. I know it's hard to figure them out. I know it's hard sometimes to understand what God has blessed you with. I've been there. I've struggled with that. I think we all have. But what I want us to realize this morning is, which one are we going to be? Which one are we going to be? You have a talent, use it. And realize this morning that you too can be a worker. I was talking to my grandparents earlier this week, and I gave them a call because my grandfather's a preacher. And I needed some scripture advice. He's one of those old preachers, who's been preaching for 800 years, and he can just, like, hey, there's a passage I'm looking for. Where's that at? He'd tell you exactly what it is. So that's what I was doing. But my grandmother was there as well, and I was telling them what I was going to be speaking on and the topic I was going to be speaking on. And then later in the week, I got this text from my grandparents that my grandfather sent me, hey, your grandmother found this piece of paper. I think it may be of use for you for your sermon. I want to read it to you because I wanted to incorporate it in the lesson, but I didn't want to put it in my own words because this is something she found. No, I don't know where it came from, but it's impactful. And this is for those who don't know what their talent is maybe or don't know exactly how they can make an impact. Just listen to these words. The title of it at the top says, so write a card. It starts with saying, I can't do much. So write a card. I'm not very good at being encouraging. So write a card. I never know what to say. So write a card. I'm not able to go visit. So write a card. I don't have a lot of free time. So write a card. I have to work late every day this week. So write a card. I'm not saying that writing a card cures every ailment, but it is the little things that can have a huge impact on people. I sometimes feel like I can't do much. There's a sibling in the faith, and they aren't attending very well, or seem so discouraged, and I can't seem to do much to help them. So write a card. It isn't much, but it is something. I struggle being a consistent Barnabas, son of encouragement. Your efforts of encouragement aren't about you, it's about them. So write a card. There are times when words are stupid things. It isn't always about what you say. Sometimes it's about saying. So write a card. I love you. I'm praying for you. I'm here. Can be more impactful than you realize. So write the card. Maybe you're limited by transportation issues. Postage services aren't limited, right? That is their job. So write a card. Let them deliver it for you. Schedules are demanding. There are always limitations on time. Between work and parenting, there's not much left over. Maybe you should reevaluate how you spend your time. Sit down and spend 10 minutes. Write the card. Maybe the question you're asking, who should I write to? The sick? refer to that list on the front of the bulletin. The discouraged or leadership or maybe just a random member you just want to encourage. So what? So write a card. And the reason this was so impactful for me is because I know how impactful these words can be. Because a lot of the times we have been in the same situations. I don't know how to encourage people. I'm very busy. I can't do much. I'm not good at being encouraging. I don't really know what to say. You don't have to work. You don't have to kill yourself trying to work. It could be as simple as writing a card. God has given you the ability to encourage people in little ways or in big ways. But if you're that person struggling to figure out what can I do to encourage somebody, it doesn't have to be writing a card, but you know what I mean. Write a card. Do that little thing that can go a long way. And what I want you to realize before we move on from this morning is realize that one time where someone did something very little for you, but it meant the world. I've been there. I've been there often. And it's a lot more, I think, than we sometimes realize. That there's been times in our life someone did something very little for us, but it meant a lot. Write a card. It's all you need to do. If you are struggling with it, figure out that it is not the big things in life, that it can be as small as writing a card. If you want this piece of paper, I'd be happy to share it with you. It's very encouraging, and I hope it's encouraging to you too. But I want us to recap this morning. You too can be a worker. Let's realize that you were created to work. That was a really interesting point. Maybe it was just for me, I don't know. But you were created for a purpose. And yes, we're here working secular jobs, making a living. But the reason you were created was to work, but was to work for the Lord. And realize that. Remember that this morning. Also remember to have a desire to help those in need and spread the gospel. I think I said this exact thing this morning. There are people out there who don't know Jesus. There's people out there who don't have God. But you're here for a reason this morning, aren't you? You have Jesus. You have a desire to know your Father. Share that with those who don't have it. You may be their only hope at knowing who God is. Have that desire. Serve the Lord and do His work with everything you have. You may know what hard work is, and you may have done a lot of great things in your life and worked your way up in your company or whatever you may have done and put a lot of hard work into something. Do that same thing, if not more, with the work of the Lord. Put your heart into it and let the Lord take your heart. Your heart is nobody else's but God's. Okay? Your heart is nobody else's but God. So give it your all. And give it all to Him. Don't give Him a little bit. Don't give Him a lot. Give Him all. Okay? Remember that it's important to serve God with everything that we have. And keep a good mindset to finish the work that you desire. Especially if you've started work, finish that work. Keep your mindset ready to go. Don't have this we should mindset. I regret it. And you may be able to talk to Aaron. I hope he regrets it too. Maybe doing something that one day because we have the opportunity to do something. Keep that mindset. If you say you're going to do something, do it. If you find the opportunities, take it. Have a mindset of being a worker, being ready to work. And lastly, you are talented. And this world needs you. I promise you, everyone in this room, I hope I can scan and look at every single eye in this room. You are talented, okay? So use it. Don't waste your talents. You may not know what you can do, but pray. Seek God, and He will show you exactly what He wants you to do. Continually read His scriptures. Continually seek for the answers of what you can do to help people. Don't waste what you have. You don't want Jesus to come back and look at you and saying, you wicked and slothful servant, because how much more will it mean when you face Him face to face and He goes, well done, my good and faithful servant. I can picture that in my mind and how that will make me feel. And I can also picture the other, right? I can picture Him saying, you haven't done what I wanted you to do. You are talented. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Because people will come in this world and say, you are worth nothing. It will happen, and I think a lot of us may have been there. Don't let anybody tell you that you aren't talented. You have everything in the world to do to share the gospel. Don't waste what you have. So if you're here this morning, if you're trying to figure out this hard situation of what God wants you to do, if you're here this morning and you haven't been part of the work and all you've been doing is coming on Sundays, maybe Wednesdays, but maybe not, and all you do is saying, I'll get my check boxes marked. What change is needed? And how are you going to apply that change? If you need any help this morning, we are a family. We are here for each other. Jesus wants us to work together to give everybody the opportunity to go to heaven. We are here for you. If you need anything this morning, please, please, please let that be known. We're here to help. We're here to work. And while we stand and while we sing.